All right, if you have a Bible, open to Romans chapter 12. How many of you were not here last week for David Lovelace? Can I see your hands? Okay, where were you? Go. You start with you. Where were you? No, just kidding. Just kidding. He's getting in my business. No, just kidding. David Lovelace spoke last week and talked about true self, false self, talked about our identity. His title was, Who Do You Think You Are? And I'm just going to tell you, it was a really significant message. We're in a series on identity, and I would just encourage you, if you were here, listen to it again. If you weren't here, please go online and listen to it. It will really, really help you. I came back from my first mission trip. I've been on, 12, 13. The first one I went to was in the Philippines. I was there for 3 weeks, and I came back, and as I was going to the SeaTac airport, I got stopped by the customs agents. And, I didn't really know what that was really all about. I had my passport. I showed it to them. But they kept asking me questions, and it really felt after a while like they were over-scrutinizing me. And I didn't really know why they were doing that and what that was all about. And I thought it was a little kind of humorous, and they just kept talking, and they'd confer, and then they'd look, and they'd check. And I just remember thinking, what is going on right now? And so they said, we need you to go over to this other place. Now, usually an other place is probably not a good place if you've been stopped, by the customs agents. And so they sent me over to this other far corner, and there was a guy there, and he was my neighbor. And he looked at me, and he said, what are you doing here? I went, I don't know. He goes, I wonder who they think you are. Because apparently it's not good to be seeing him, to get stewarded onto him. And he said, I don't know who they think you are. And so that was a little alarming. And after talking to him, and he knew I wasn't anybody bad, he let me go. But that sentence kind of rung through my ears for years. I don't know who they think that you are. And in life, there's a lot of people that have a lot of thoughts about who you are. I want to tell you today, it really doesn't matter whoever they is, thinks you are. The only thing that matters is who God thinks you are, and ultimately who God says you are. So we're going to talk about identity and Romans chapter 12. Yeah, you can clap. 3 of you over here. It's okay. Good. Romans chapter 12. Here's kind of the punchline to the whole thing. You and I will either get and walk in our identity vertically, everybody say vertically, or horizontally. Horizontally. That's our only two options. And so in Romans chapter 12, verse 1 through 3, Paul says this, I appeal to you, therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. Now, as Paul is talking to this group of Jewish people, they all would know, in fact, pagans and Jews alike would know the sacrificial system. They would know, when they talk about a sacrifice, they would know that there would be an animal that would be brought up to an altar. I want you to get this imagery in your mind. Brought up to an altar, there would be a slaughter, there would be blood, there would be fire, there would be death, and there would be smoke that God would consider a sweet smelling aroma, and they would see smoke. So as you were going through the terrain and the geography, you would see pillars of smoke going up, and everybody would associate that image with worship is going up to God. And so he says right here that we're to present ourselves, not on the weekends, not once a week, every single day we're to present ourselves as living sacrifices, holy and acceptable to God. And it is our spiritual worship. And don't be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind that you may be able to prove or discern or test the will of God. What is the good, acceptable, and perfect will of God. You see, we will either be conformed to the image of Jesus Christ vertically, or we'll be conformed to the world, which ultimately we will be deformed by. So if you and I buy into the cultural lies and philosophies and the mores of society and culture, you and I will be anything but conformed to the image of Christ. I will say every single day, you and I have the option to look horizontally to get who we really are, and it'll be false. It'll be a false construct. It won't be right in the eyes of God, and it will make you miserable. Anybody ever have an identity crisis? Here's an identity crisis. Here's the definition. It's a period of uncertainty. Oh, that's not what it says. Click. Thank you. Period of uncertainty and confusion in which a person's sense of identity becomes insecure, typically due to a change in their expected aims or roles in society. I will tell you that every person in the Bible, every leader in the Bible, you can trace at some point in their life, they had an insecure moment and an identity crisis. Usually it's when God shows up and calls a man or a woman and asks them to do some significant thing. In the light of who God is and what God's saying, they crumble under the pressure. Their change in role changes the culprit. We get insecure, we get uncertain about who we are and the role we've been playing. And as much as I would like to think, I'm going to tell on myself today, as much as I would like to think that for the most part, I'm a secure guy. If you ask my wife, she would tell you, he's a pretty secure dude. I am. Every now and then, something tries to get in and dismantle me. And it's just almost embarrassing. 2 weeks ago, took a week off, had a staycation. Dumb idea. Staying at home on vacation. Dumb idea. And 3 days of not knowing what to do with myself, I look at my wife, we're outside, and I go, I think I'm having an identity crisis. And I started just kind of rambling on about how just weird I feel and insecure I feel and, da-da-da-da-da-da. I'm just pouring out, and she just looks at me and she just listens. And I said, seriously, I think I'm in a full-blown identity crisis. And she says, I know, you always have an identity crisis when you're on vacation. I said, what? She goes, oh, yeah. Oh, for the last 15 years, every vacation you take, you have an identity crisis. I hear this same tape playing every time. Now, part of me was relieved. I said, you mean it's a pattern? She said, yeah. So part of me was thankful. Thank God it's a pattern and not some random spasmodic thing that just, leaped up and ate my lunch one day. And so I said, wow. She goes, when you're on vacation, I thought, well, why is that? And why that is as much as I would like to tell you and suggest to you that my identity is firmly rooted in who God is, if I'm going to be honest, when you take me out of my role and out of my title as pastor and I'm not doing anything pastoral, I'm left with myself and I'm exposed, weak, pathetic, and vulnerable for my wife to see. It was hideous, I'm telling you. Poor woman, she's been married to me for 30 years. Look at verse 3. Verse 3, for I say through the grace given to me, everyone who is among you, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think. Okay, so it's okay to think about yourself. Did you know that? It's not some narcissistic thing. It's not a bad thing. But he says, don't think of yourself more highly than you ought to think, but think soberly as God has dealt to each one the measure of faith. Okay? You think about it. Only God has the true assessment of you, right? It's God's call. I think thinking soberly, okay, I know it means without intoxicants, anything that makes you delusional, anything that obstructs, your perception. But I think really, when I think of ourselves soberly, it literally means to see ourselves as God sees us, no more and no less. I mean, that's it. I think that's the bullseye right there. You who are who you are because God says who you are. And you don't think of yourself more highly than you ought to think, and don't think more lowly. Just think of yourself the way God thinks of you. And that's called sober thinking. Now, when you and I don't live out of our created identity, we're pretty much left to construct our lives. When we construct our lives, I will tell you this, outside of God, we will construct it all wrong. And the construction that we have will be, from the input horizontally, people, culture, popularity, popular opinion, all those kinds of things. It's interesting how they rate people on the news. They rate people as either trending up or trending down. How would you like people to sit around and evaluate your popularity and at the end of the day say, he or she is trending up? And then you can feel really good about yourself. I'm trending up. And then all of a sudden you say the wrong thing, do the wrong thing, show up with the right crowd. Now you're trending down. Can you imagine having your identity rooted in popular opinion? Horrible. So there's some lies that surround this horizontal identity, and here they are, and I will say that all of us have bit into one or more of these during our life. Number one, the first lie is what you do determines your significance. Think about it. When you are introduced to somebody, what's the first thing they ask? What do you do? Hi, this is Bill. What do you do, Bill? And then, based on what you say you do, you see their valuation or devaluation of who you are. I've always wanted to tell somebody, oh, Bob, what do you do? I'm a brain surgeon. Wouldn't you just love to be able to pull that one? Yeah, I'm a brain surgeon. Whoa. Seriously, and everybody, there wouldn't be one person that went, that's amazing. You're incredible. Now, what if you were a sanitation engineer, though? The garbage man. Okay. I mean, you know, yeah, you could just see where somebody would say, oh, you're a garbage man. Oh, well, that's honorable. It's an honest living, right? And people do this. Every time I meet somebody, what do you do? And you can just see. I mean, you know, when I tell people, what do you do? I'm a pastor. You can just see, man, that the wheels start turning. And some of them just default to a real awkward, oh, that's cool. Like, please don't preach to me. I mean, that's what they do. You should see it. And I just want to say, calm down. Just settle down here. It's going to be okay. I'm a pastor. I love you. I'm not going to preach at you. I do have a few scriptures in my back pocket, though. I mean, if you want it, if you're begging for it. Some people will just, sometimes give you a little disdain. They will. Like, It's like, oh, geez, what does that mean, man? They had some experience somewhere. And, and if you rise and fall to that, you'll go up, you'll go down. You can't do that. You know what I want to say when somebody says, what do you do? I want to say, about what? What do you do? About what? Terrorism, world peace, poverty, I don't know. Tuck that one away. You probably will never get it, but try that sometime. Write that down. What do you do? About what? Yeah. You are hard-pressed to find anybody that when you ask them who they are to give you an accurate assessment of who they are. They will always default to what they do. Number 2, second lie, your possessions determine your value. Once again, labels don't define you. Where you live doesn't define you. You live in a gated community. You live in a big house. You live in a small house. Jesus said, be on guard, watch out, beware of greed, for a man's life does not consist in the abundance of the possessions that he has. If anything that these fires have showed me is that, you know what? Big houses and small houses still burn. They really do. Now, bigger houses take longer to burn, but they all burn. So guess what? All your stuff, if you piled it in a big pile, it would burn. It would melt. Some of it would melt, but it would burn. Ultimately, it would burn. So when you buy the lie that the stuff you have and the kind of stuff and the quality of stuff that you have defines you, man, you bit into a big lie. It's a misassessment. It can never work. It'll never work in your favor. And once again, humbling myself, I would like to tell you that this stuff doesn't matter to me. And most of the time, it doesn't matter to me. But every now and then it creeps up and it slaps me silly and I'm absolutely embarrassed. You see, we had a kid that wrecked one of my cars and it was the Volvo. And I'm a Volvo guy. I love Volvos. And he totaled it. Okay, it's in a scrapyard in downtown Sacramento. And somehow my wife got a new car and I inherited her car. And her car is a red Volkswagen Beetle. Now, I honestly didn't really think much about that. I didn't, because I'm not wrapped up in that kind of stuff. Until a couple weeks ago, when I did a funeral. And I do the funeral, and now I have to go up to the gravesite, and I realize there's only one red Beetle of all these nice cars. And it's like, so I hurried up and got to my car before anybody saw what I was driving. I'm just being honest with you, man. This is what happened. And it's diesel, so it sounds like this. So I'm in my little red Beetle, leather though, and I'm driving this diesel. I'm trying to scurry away from the people. And I'm texting my wife. You're saying, you're texting and driving? Yes, but I was in a cemetery. I was texting, and I said, you know what, honey? Me in a red Beetle at a funeral is wrong. It's wrong. And she said, I agree. And I went, well, you got the new car and I got the Beetle. Now, here's where it gets really strange. So I make it through that episode, okay? All right, I'm not my Beetle, okay? Good, it's just a car. Thank you, Jesus. And then 2 days ago, I'm at a light, okay? I'm at a stoplight, Wood Creek and Pleasant Grove. And that awkward moment when an older lady pulls up in a red Beetle and I visibly sunk. I'm telling you, I'm not wrapped up in this stuff, but it started working me over. You're a pathetic man in a little red Beetle. And I'm just sitting there and I'm thinking, don't look. I am not going to look over. I am not going to look. I know she's looking at me. I'm not looking. And that light went on forever. And I'm just sitting there. It's like, and everybody's driving through the intersection. Oh, look at that. I'm just sitting there. And so I glance over, and she rolls her window down. And she's an older lady, and she looks at me and smiles. And I roll the window down, and she goes, "You look really good in that Beetle." I said, "You look better in that Beetle. I hate you. Get out of my life. I don't ever want to see you again anywhere. Don't even come to the church. I don't want you parking next to me." But once again, that's a hideous, subtle little thing. But all of a sudden, why am I rocked? Why have all of a sudden, I forgot who Jesus was, and now I'm driving a little red German Beetle that was made mostly in Mexico. Brutal. And if it can sneak up on me, it can sneak up on you. You're not your label. You're not your car. You're not your stuff. Number 3, comparison is a means to gauge your worth. Once again, that's a lie, man. And here's the deal. Everybody compares. You compare how good a life you think somebody else has. You compare spiritual gifts in the church. You compare, you watch people, just go somewhere, watch people. People check each other out. It's really amazing. Women, you're the worst. You check women out. It's amazing. I don't know what you talk about, but you see 2 women here, see a woman walk by, you watch these 2, as soon as she walks by, they go like this, their eyes. And then I don't know what you're saying here. I really don't. I would love to go, "Excuse me, what are you saying?" But they do. They're conferring on one another. And they're judging. And they're not saying nice things, because if you're saying nice things, you just talk normal. But they lean into each other. They do that. And guys don't do that. We're too actually shallow, so we don't do that at all. It's like, I don't care. Wow. Comparison is a faulty gauge. Here's the problem with comparison. You usually compare other people's front stage with your backstage. Meaning, you look at them and they look like they got life nailed, that they're doing great. You don't see what's going on in their backstage. And then you know what's going on in your backstage. You know how bad it is. And then you're judging them. And so there's an incongruence. It's not a good thing. I'll just tell you this. This is what I have found after living 58.75 years on this planet. Nobody has it together. And I mean nobody. In fact, just look at the person next to you and tell them, you got nothing going. Go ahead, tell them you got nothing going. Nobody. So what you're comparing yourself to is not real. Even in the church, you compare yourself with people who are really spiritual. At 1 minute, they're walking, "Oh, Jesus just speaking to me all the time. And oh gosh, man, I can't stop the revelation from coming." And then, No, seriously. I've talked to those same people 3 days later. Their life is shipwreck. So just because God uses you and me in a certain way doesn't mean anything. It just means he chooses to use us. It's not worth comparing to each other. Don't compare. It's no good. No bueno. Spanish, that's it. No, never mind. I'm not going to tell it. There's enough self-effacing going on here. I was on a plane one time, and I was going to Ethiopia, and the lady sitting next to me, like somehow in the conversation, 3 minutes, tells me she speaks 5 languages. You know what I was so tempted to say? I speak 6. So I mumbled, I speak 1, a little Spanish. Pathetic. You're so pathetic. There is a true self, a false self, and a Facebook self. It's all comparison. They actually have classes at universities that talk about the phenomena of narcissism and social media. You can take classes and learn how whacked of a society we are that wants to post the idyllic life, the imagined idyllic life. And they did one study with moms, and they said 2/3 of moms feel an incredible amount of pressure to portray their family and depict it as perfect for people to see. That's what we know. If you're a mom, your life is hell. No, on certain days. But it's interesting. You just troll through and you see the feeds and everybody's life is pretty. Mommy's baking and kids are doing crafts and memorizing languages and, click, the album is all that. Once, wouldn't you just like to see a mom with one kid on one hip, one kid on the other, barf going down here, barf going down here. She looks horrible. Yeah, this is my life. Pray for me. Wouldn't you just like to see that version of honesty once? Just once. Man, it's the truth. Comparison doesn't work. Number 4, I must present myself strong at all times. Showing weakness in any form will cause people to think less of me. I have found the opposite to be true. You get around somebody that is only showing you their good side, only telling you what they got together, I would tell you, they will repel the average person. Because you can't relate. Can you relate to anybody that's got it all together? No, I can't. But you show somebody that shows vulnerability and weakness, not in a needy, neurotic way all the time, but lets you in once in a while, you empathize with that. You get close to that. See, the problem with this whole thing, that when we feel like we got to present ourselves, you and I live with cognitive dissonance. And that's the gap between our beliefs, our true beliefs about us, about anything, and how we're really living. And that gap right there, that's what eats our lunch. That's where all the stress lies. Number 5, if you let people get too close and see your flaws and weaknesses, they will reject you. They won't reject you. The problem with that pressure is that you present the edited versions of your life, which is why I absolutely love the words that Jesus spoke when he said, I am the way, I am the truth. And I love that. We'll do a word study on the word truth. It literally means there was nothing hidden or opaque in Jesus' life. So what could be said about Jesus is what you and I really long to be said of us. And that is, what you see is what you really get all the time. Imagine that. Jesus, man, never played shell games, never bought into all those kinds of things. He just was who he was, the Son of God, the Messiah. What you see is what you get. And I would tell you, man, pray that prayer. God, help me be so truthful, live out of my true identity, who you say I am, who you've created me to be, that it could be said of me, what you see is what you get. I think that's a great honor right there. Getting your identity horizontally is equivalent to walking through life next to a carnival mirror, always distorted. You ever go to the fair, you see those mirrors, and you go, oh my word, my neck is that long. You know what's interesting about that? It's just an observation. I used to go to this fair every year. Puyallup Fair is a great fair. Every year, and you can see these carnival mirrors. Do you know that not one person will ever walk up to a carnival mirror, take one look and walk away? Never. No one. You go to the fair, observe, play a little psychologist, watch. Nobody walks up, takes one look and walks away. You know what they do? They always move in the mirror to change who their shape is. They always go. Because they really don't like what they see. And until you and I get our identity from God, we walk through our life just seeing things that aren't really true about us, believing the lies and living out of a false identity. Now, let's talk about worship. Go through this. What time is it? What time are we supposed to be out of here? Doesn't matter. Thank you, Brian. He's paid to say that. Vertical identity. This is where we have to get it. Vertical identity is rooted in worshiping God as creator. I mean, think about it. You start at the very start of Genesis. In the beginning, God created. That's it. It all starts with him. God created man in his image, 127. Then he goes on, he created them, male and female. And when he created man, he took dust out of the ground and he breathed the pneuma, the breath of life into him. It started with God. Everything starts with God. Everything ends with God. Our worship has to be rooted in who God is as the creator, which also tells me on a practical level that if for some reason I'm in some kind of jam, he has the creativity to get me out of it. He knows how to create things. God didn't just create things in the beginning, Genesis 1:1, and stop creating. God is still creating. It's a good thing, and he needs to be worshiped that way. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Acts 17, God himself gives all men life and breath and everything else. Everything you're experiencing right now is a grace gift from God. The air you breathe, the breath you take, the fact that your lungs can expand and constrict, second after second after second is breath from God. It's a gift from God, from your Creator. I woke up this morning, 5-something this morning. I woke up. I was groggy. It's like, oh man, what time is it? I'm laying there, and all of a sudden, I hear the Holy Spirit speak, Ecclesiastes chapter 12, verse 1. Remember your Creator in the days of your youth. So when times of adversity come, your soul doesn't say, I find no pleasure in them. And you know, when I heard that, I just thought, man, remember your Creator in the days of your youth. For God to say that to me, he still assesses me as a young person. So apparently anything under 59, you're young. I was kind of excited about that. Remember, call to your attention, call to your remembrance, recall, bring it forward. God is the Creator. Psalm 139, verse 13, you know these, you've heard this. You formed my inward parts. You covered me in my mother's womb. I will praise you, for I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are your works. This is great. You take all of the heavens and the earth and the creation of God. But he says right here, marvelous are your works, and my soul knows that very well. When was the last time you thanked God for you? When was the last time you sat down and worshiped God and said, God, you made me. You made me as tall as I'm supposed to be. I know you want to be taller, but he made you as tall as you're supposed to be. He made you exactly the way he wanted you to turn out. The color of your hair, the color of your eyes, about your personality. He formed, he knit, he wove together when you were in your mother's womb. Your predisposition to, what your temperament is, sanguine, melancholy, choleric, phlegmatic. I'm a sanguine. I love being a sanguine. I don't envy melancholies. I don't. Melancholies shouldn't envy us sanguines either. And clerics and those guys, But when was the last time you said, God, I thank you. I want to thank you. You women. When was the last time you said, God, I just thank you. You made me a woman. Men, when was the last time you thanked God for being a man? There's no confusion. There's no confusion. With God, there's no confusion. He made them male and female. So you can chop up, you can hack, you can rearrange, you can do all that kind of stuff. It doesn't change how God created you. I think if we would spend more time thanking our Creator God for how he made us, we wouldn't waste our time wishing we were somebody else. It's rooted in worship. Okay. Thank you, Brian. One more of these, I'll buy you lunch. Great quote from Paul Tripp. It's only when you have God in his proper place and are celebrating who he is that you can ever truly know yourself. To the degree that we don't worship God for who he is and what he's done, we'll take unseen identity confusion into life. So because he's a creator, God says, I'm a new creation. You're not an improved version of who you were when you came to Christ. You are a brand new, unique, and distinct species of being. That's what being a Christian is. The Spirit of God changed you from the inside out, made you completely unique, a new species of being that has never been created before. Individual fingerprints. Amazing. But that's mind-blowing stuff. Vertical identity is rooted in worshiping God as sovereign. This takes a lot of rest right here. Acts 17, verse 24, the God who made the world and everything in it. That's what Colossians says. By him, all things that were made by him. Colossians 1:16. Being the Lord of heaven and earth. There's one Lord. That's it. His name's Jesus. There's one Lord over everything. He doesn't live in temples made by man. God is not here because of a building called the Rock of Roseville. God is not in any building. He doesn't need a temple. He doesn't need anything. That's what makes him God. But he chooses to dwell amongst his people. And where two or more are gathered in his name, he shows up. He's there. nor is he served by human hands, though he needed anything, since he himself gives to all men life, breath, and everything. And he made from one man every nation of mankind to live on all the face of the earth, and having determined the allotted periods and boundaries of their dwelling place. That's the sovereignty of God, that you were born at this time, that you're alive right now, that you live in this city, that you're a man, that you're a woman, the color of your skin, the hue of your skin, your country of origin, where you were born. That's all God's call. He said, you be born there, you be born there. You look like that, you look like that. He determined the whole thing. There's no reason to fight it. He's sovereign, and we worship him as sovereign. It's a good thing. Because he's sovereign, he says, I'm chosen to be a part of his script. Now listen to this. You go to the self-help section of a bookstore, and there's a gazillion books on how to figure your life out. When you really understand that God is sovereign, you understand he chose you to be a part of a script that he wrote before you showed up. This is a good thing right here. Psalm 139, verse 16, all the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. I don't write my own story. I don't write my own script. If I'm not writing my script, I'm not the star of the story. God's the star. Jesus is the hero of my story. He wrote the script. I'm not saying, God, help me figure my life out. He said, no, I want you to play this part at this time. This is what the script says. Don't go extemporaneous on me. Flow. And you know, at the end, when the screen credits roll through heaven, what do you call the last guy in the credits? What do you call that guy? Jason, what do you call the last? You know, the guy that makes what's the little appearance where he just kind of pops in, like you in Sleepless in Seattle? Male. Sorry. He was an extra. Yeah, Jason was in Sleepless in Seattle. Was that it? So he gets screen credits. Anyways, at the end of this whole deal, get his autograph afterwards. So I'm just in the script. He's sovereign. I did not sign up for this. I wouldn't have signed up for this. He knows. He called. I just try to show up every single day and do what he tells me to do. I rest in that. I try to rest in that. I'm not somebody that I'm not. I'm not living a life that I'm trying to construct. I'm worshiping God as sovereign. And you know what? Let me say this. Personal sovereignty is delusional. When you take sovereignty in your own hands and think, I'm going to create my life, it's delusional. You can't. In fact, I'll say whatever you construct, at the end, you won't like it. Because only God is sovereign. The last thing here, vertical identity is rooted in worshiping God as Savior. You know, I think it's really helpful to reflect where you came from. I don't say bury yourself in it, but I tell you what, I've been following Jesus wobbly for 33 years, 34 years. I can look back before that time and know that my life was described in Ephesians 1 and 2. And it says that before Christ, you were dark, you walked in darkness, you were strangers and aliens from God, you were lost, without hope, and without God. I got it. I got it. But he chose to save us. He chose to send Jesus. And because my identity is rooted in worshiping him as Savior, he's a Savior, I have to come to the conclusion I'm worth rescuing. Let me just say, you were worth rescuing according to God. Not because of you, but because he assessed his value on you. And he said you're worth rescuing. Let me ask you a question. How many of you have tangibly, physically been rescued? How many of you, like from a car wreck, anybody been rescued from drowning? Let me see your hands. Is that an amazing feeling to be rescued? I remember when I was a kid I was in San Mateo. Mom signed me up for swimming lessons. I was a little guy, man. I'm in the pool, and there was a big class. We're in the shallow end. I'm in the last row, and you know when the pool starts to go like that? Well, I was like bobbing. It's my name, Bob, and I was bobbing. And I was like, and as the contour of the pool was going down, it was like, well, this isn't good, and I didn't know how to swim. I mean, this is like the first lesson. I'm like playing, and the instructor doesn't see me. My mom's pregnant, I mean, big time, with my sister, jumps out of the bleachers, runs down to the pool. That was my mom. Runs down to the pool, yells at the lifeguard, the swim instructor. He dives in, he saves me. I'm just telling you something. You may not appreciate breathing, but when you're inhaling water, you will appreciate breathing. That is no joke. Of course, what do my parents do after that? Every night at the supper table, you better eat your vegetables so you can learn how to swim. Eat your broccoli, you'll be a good swimmer. Okay. If they were still alive, I'd call CPS. Let's stand up. Think about these verses. You were worth rescuing. Ephesians 1:4, as he chose us in him before the foundation of the world. Hard to believe, man. God thought about you long before you got here. We should be holy and blameless. God, rich in mercy, because of his great love wherein he loved us. If the only thing you get out of identity with God is that you really get that he loves you, that's the main event right there. Paul said, I am, by the grace of God, who I am. You are who you are by the grace of God. And I love grace, the all-inclusive pass into eternity and his inheritance. That's what grace is. Grace humbles us without degrading, elevates without inflating us, tells us apart from Christ, we have nothing of eternal value. So, I don't know where you've been getting your identity from. I would suggest today, get it in the worship of God. And don't wait for the weekend to do it. You can worship God. You don't have to have a good voice. I don't. I make noises. And God interprets it as praise. It's awesome. Could be God right there. It's Jesus. Go ahead and answer it. Where's that phone? Give me that phone. Here's something I've been doing. It's really helped a lot. We're gonna worship. We're out of here. Somebody asked me, what's the condition of your soul? How come they never ask stuff like that when things are going really well? I just said, man, my soul is boom, 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 boom. And he kind of looked, took a step back, and he was a little taken back at my level of self-awareness. And he said, I'm going to give you a challenge. He goes, I want you to every day, first thing in the morning, take 10 minutes and let Psalm 46:10 guide you. Be still and know that I am God. And shut everything off. Shut everything for 10 minutes. So I've been doing that for over a week now. Set my little 10-minute deal, and it's hard. ADD, dude, you have no idea where this head goes. Vroom, it's all over the place. It is trying to herd cats. What do they say? What's that saying? Herd cats? I don't know. It's all over the place. And so literally to do that. So I've been doing that. And I just, in my mind, I meditate on that verse. Be still. And I just think that according to God, I'm a human being that he created. I'm not a human doing. He's never been impressed with anything I've done. He will never be impressed with anything that I do. I just have to be still. Quietness and confidence will be your strength. Still. He leads me beside still waters, not rushing rapids. Still waters, just still. The fact that there's so much noise and activity in the mind and the soul tells me how unsettled and unestablished I am with who I am with him. And so every day I've been doing that faithfully. It's making a difference. And all of a sudden, my noise, my horizontal stuff goes away, and he becomes who he really is, preeminent in all things. And know that I'm God. Sit there and say, you are God. And the first thing that comes to my mind every single day when I think about that, I think, you are God. I'm not. Sometimes I get a little confused. I'm not God. You know how liberating that is? I can't fix nothing. I really can't make nothing. I can't do nothing. I just have to let him be God. That's awesome. I want to encourage you. Some of you get like whacked around horizontally. Dial in. Be quiet. Be still.